hope the internet will work today. And we're live. Hello, everyone. Hi, Andy. How's it going?
Very well, thank you. Very well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited for today's session. We had a couple of similar sessions like this before, and it's always been super popular, super helpful for everyone. What you're going to get today is kind of an overview of what's new, what's happening in the world of social media, all the platforms, what are they doing, what's changing, new platforms, new tools. Something have been removed, something has been added, something's working differently. We just figured out today with our team that Facebook has changed the name of units to guides, just to make life a little bit more difficult for us, so that we're talking about something we don't understand each other anymore. And definitely get ready for, as Kirsty said last time, content heavy on calories, which is fantastic. I love absolutely her saying how she summarizes this, that yes, Andy's sessions are definitely high on content calories. But without any further ado, I will stop wobbling. I will hand over to Andy and let him tell us what's going on in the world.
Cool. Thank you very much, Lanka, and thank you everyone for giving me a bit of time. So yeah, this session's a bit of a summary of what's happened in Q1 of this year, and it's kind of slightly strange to realize that we've been through a quarter of this year already. Not sure where that has gone. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. So we're going to dive straight into it, because usually these sessions we kind of go through every month, one by one, all of the features, changes and updates. But I thought for this, we'll do a slightly different flow, because you can always go back to any of the stuff that we've done, because I do this every single month. So, you can go back to the previous recordings at any point. You can always ask me for those. But it's sometimes quite nice just to summarize what on earth happened over the last 90 or so days. So we're going to look at a few things today. So firstly, tiny introduction. In case you're not aware, I'm Andy. I'm one of the founding team of a company called ContentCal. We spend our lives in social media, and it's our job to keep up to date as best as we can. Don't get me wrong, there's still lots of surprises for us too. It's our job to really keep up to date with everything that's happening in the world of social, so we can kind of orientate our platform to be as forward thinking as is possible in the world of social. Hence the reason we talk about this kind of stuff all the time. And this is what ContentCal looks like, of which there's always discounts available for CSM members. Anyway, that's all I'm going to talk about with regards to ContentCal. Let's go into the really valuable bit today, which is data, trends, changes. So let's start with some data. So let's hope you got a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or whatever your beverage of choice is, because there's a lot of information flying your way. So you might have seen some of this, but I think it's really nice to kind of start here. And I want to just direct your attention to the right-hand side here, active social media users. Over the last year, social media has grown, or social media usage has grown by 13%. That is an extra 490 million people joining social media channels within the last 12 months. From a numerical term, that is the biggest jump that we've seen in the history of social. And obviously it's driven through reasons that we can all understand. But the thing about that is that once usage increases, now naturally that kind of usage gets split across multiple platforms. And of course, it's not just about people like 490 million people just joining Facebook. Typically, people will be creating accounts across multiple platforms. So if we start to look across all of here, we can start to see who's been the biggest platforms of growth, right? So we've got the top 8, and I just want to focus on the ones that are kind of more native to the Western world, let's call it, because there's some bigger ones in China, for example. Facebook still leads the way, 2.7 billion monthly active users, big growth as well. So the percentage wise looks smaller, but the numbers are just so ludicrously big. Instagram, once again, had a really big year. So that's fabulous growth. Once again, TikTok, superstar growth, as you expect. They're expecting to hit 1 billion monthly active users. So the way that this has grown and quickly gained market share, and if you look at Instagram, for example, which has been with us for about 10 years now, I forget. So the growth of TikTok has just been incredible, but we all know that. Pinterest has been one of those things that's continued to grow. So if you look at these three in the middle, they're all north of 30% growth. So my attention's taken by these three, like TikTok, Pinterest, and Reddit. these are ones that are continuing to show significant percentile growth despite some already really big numbers. Pinterest and Reddit in particular are ones that we don't see and we don't talk about that much as social media platforms. They're not used as heavily in the UK as they are in the US and in other countries. US specifically, when we're talking about Reddit, is where its predominant user base is. And because I think one of the things is that these two kind of platforms have to be treated quite differently when we think about social media marketing. Whereas typically, the usual suspects, Facebook, Insta, LinkedIn, Twitter, we can think about them all in pretty much the same way as like good platforms to build communities and also distribute our content. Whereas when we start thinking about Pinterest, there's actually a different strategy that we need to think about if we're going to do Pinterest well. And one of the best things about Pinterest, actually, just whilst we're talking about it, is your ability to use Pinterest for research purposes. A fantastic tip for you, actually, if you go to trends.pinterest.com, I'm always looking at that because it's so fantastic to see what the kind of emerging digital trends are, because Pinterest make that abundantly clear. So that's trends.pinterest.com. So I use Pinterest heavily for more about research than publication of content. So once again, that's a slightly different use case for how we might use Pinterest for marketing purposes. And for me personally, I use Reddit in the same way. Reddit's not a tool that you could just go ahead and start to like publish your content to, because Reddit operates much more on like a forum basis. But for me, and certainly because my interest is in the world of social media and content marketing, I find the communities on Reddit incredibly helpful because there's some really, really knowledgeable people on there, but also fantastic places to do research. So that's kind of how we use those platforms. But going on to the other ones, they've all grown basically is a short story here. But there's one platform that's kind of conspicuous by its absence, and that's YouTube. In numerical terms, not in percentile terms, but if you looked at the pure numbers, YouTube has been the biggest growing platform. And to be honest with you, this is just the tip of the iceberg, really, with YouTube. The pandemic has really propelled YouTube to unbelievable growth, because the amount of consumption of YouTube as a platform isn't just like it's not increasing just based on like mobile and desktop consumption, which is increasing. Its most notable consumption increase is around how it's being used on smart TVs, i.e. we're starting to see YouTube encroach in our typical casual leisure time viewing consumption. So replacing those Netflix, replacing kind of Now TV or whatever, platforms, Amazon Prime, etc. So YouTube has got some significant growth. And to be honest with you, I still find it quite surprising why it's not a major factor in most people's content marketing strategies. For me, it's one of the most important platforms. And the point is 2.3 billion, active users, whilst that is, massive. If you looked just 6 months ago, it was at 2 billion. That's 300 million new people it's added in the last 6 months. That is insane growth, as I'm sure you know. So for me, this is one of the real standouts. So all of these new users joining social, all of these new platforms, well, not new platforms, all these platforms are growing. But I think one thing it's important to see, and I've shown this data before, but honestly, it's one of my favorite nerdy bits of data, which is quite hard to interpret if you just look at this slide. It's not laid out in the best way, if I'm honest. But if I kind of talk you through it, I think for me, this is one of the most useful bits of data, because this shows that, yes, platforms have grown. Yes, there's lots more people, but ultimately the way that they're using, the way they kind of overlap between platforms is something we really need to consider. Because we might think as a business, we're comfortable on Instagram and we want to spend our time focusing on Instagram as our channel. But if you start to think about it in this way, here, what this data is telling us is that Instagram is used, or nearly 100% of Instagrammers use another platform, right? So already we know that our audience are on other platforms, and 85% of them also use Facebook, 95% of them also use YouTube, and it kind of dips off a little bit, 60% use Twitter. So that kind of gives us a bit of an idea that if we are building an Instagram first strategy, no problem at all about like leading on Instagram if that's where you've seen growth before. And I'm only just picking on Instagram here as an example. But if you've got an Instagram first strategy, making sure that you have an approach for Facebook, for YouTube, for Twitter, and to a lesser extent TikTok, but we're going to see that grow, you can actually start to think that my audience is split across multiple platforms. And I have this conversation quite a lot, and I'm interested in kind of opening other people's views up on this as well towards the end of this session. Is that for me, my kind of main focus is trying to get a message that we're trying to put out across, one social channel, and trying to put that across multiple. I typically hear people often hear that and go, oh, right, well, surely people switch off if they see the same message across multiple platforms. But I think what this is telling us is that it's absolutely essential, because we know that organic reach is very challenging. So i.e., even if we have 1,000 followers on Instagram, for example, it's very unlikely that even a tiny percentage of those are going to see our post. We need to give our content the best possible chance of being seen. That's our job. So realistically, we need to have a multi-channel approach to our strategy, tying in Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, etc. So this data, I think, is really important to help us understand more tactically, what channels should be part of our multi-channel approach if, for example, we lead on YouTube or we lead on Instagram. So hopefully that makes sense. So there's some data to get us started. So lots of encouraging stuff and lots of things to think about already, just with some 3 slides of high-level data. But let's look at some 4 trends that we've seen over the last quarter. So 55 plus turning digital. One of the things that have shifted us as a community, as a society forward more than anything in this pandemic is about the age demographics and how that's kind of converging in terms of more people of 55 plus getting involved in social. So a lot of the growth that we were just talking about over the last 12 months has been driven by an older generation now getting involved in social, rather than having just a kind of limited peripheral understanding of what social media is, or they've heard of Facebook, for example. Now that generation is absolutely coming on to social, but more importantly, interacting with it. 70% have bought something online in the last month, and increasing in how they're discovering new products. Google estimate that we've moved forward as a digital society at least 5 years within the last 12 months in the way that cross-generationally we're using digital channels to find, discover, and even purchase new products. So it's really important that social media now is not for certain genders or demographics or whatever. We need to remove any kind of biases that we had about social media, because that has changed dramatically over the last 12 months, where we might have thought, as an example, oh, Snapchat's not good for us because we don't target teens and, we target an older demographic. The demographic on Snapchat is significantly older, as is TikTok. So it's about having more of an open mind approach to our different channels, rather than using kind of slightly more casual / lazy kind of judgments that we might have held 12 months prior, that we need to change how we think about things, because ultimately the way that people are consuming digital and digital channels has changed dramatically. So going from 55 plus, now first starting to use social, into the future of VR and AR, which it does seem like quite a jump. And typically I want to kind of qualify this, is that this is a very kind of buzzwordy type of slide. Like virtual reality and augmented reality, i.e. what VR and AR is, are 2 very different things. Virtual reality, we're still a bit away from what we can actually do as marketers in small businesses to utilize effectively. So let's park virtual reality for now, just to make our heads a bit clearer. But let's think about augmented reality, because that's actually something that all of us pretty much interact with on a daily basis, whether it's putting a funny dog face filter on when you're doing a FaceTime with family members, or the way that we've tried on some things within Snapchat or applied some filters in Instagram. All of that is augmented reality, and it's now becoming a common part of life. So this is now becoming a significant thing that the social platforms are investing in, because the future of social is driven far more about commerce. So realistically, the big competitor, the main competitor that Snapchat, Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, the main competitor they're all targeting is Amazon. And that is what they're trying to get a share of, because fundamentally, currently, all of those social platforms, the only way they make money is through advertising revenue. that isn't as sustainable as driving money directly from a consumer. So they're big on going down what we class as social commerce, and augmented reality is a big part of that. So, for example, Pinterest have rolled out their they've had this for a little while actually. They have some new try-on features. So essentially, if you're shopping a new, I'm using this as an example because this is a real life example Pinterest shared, not because I'm an expert in this, but Pinterest have some really good augmented reality try-on features where you could go ahead and look at a certain foundation or lipstick. Obviously, I'm not an expert in this, but ultimately try that on and look in your kind of Pinterest, when your Pinterest app, you can see how that product will look on you and then make that purchase directly through Pinterest. Do the same on Snapchat as well. And you can start to see how the emerging trend of people discovering products for the first time, interacting with them, trying them on, and making that purchase directly in that digital way is going to become the norm. And that's the thing that's shifted forward dramatically. And really, that's the kind of trajectory that many of the social platforms are going after. And augmented reality really plays in particularly into the whole kind of shopping experience. In the same way that, like IKEA have this as well. If you want to visualize a piece of furniture in your room, you can use the IKEA app to visualize that. And you're going to see more and more social platforms offer tools to help businesses, even smaller businesses, bring their products to life in a kind of augmented reality way so that people can explore them, touch and feel them metaphorically. And that's going to be a huge growth area. Already spoken about this, social commerce, massive Facebook shop, Instagram shop, everything I've just been saying about Pinterest and Snapchat and TikTok are absolutely all over this at the moment. If you want to kind of look at trends and get a realistic and reliable prediction of what's going to happen for the world of social, just look how China are using social media. And that really, they lead the way. They are the forward thinkers when it comes to utilizing socials, particularly in social commerce. And the way that they being China, are utilizing social platforms to drive economic value is absolutely significant. But you're starting to see this happen over here. And really, the last 12 months has been the kind of catalyst to drive that forward. So 55% of people have bought products through social media. 87% claim that social media helped them make a decision. 57% are shopping more often since the pandemic. And as we say, we've got plenty more platforms that are going to be on the way to facilitate that. And Facebook Shop now, just over the last quarter, has now fully rolled out in the UK as well. So I'm sure everyone's more than familiar with that. But it's going to be such a meaningful part of all of these social media platforms. So expect to see lots and lots more happen about that in the next quarter and for the remainder of the year. Spoke about YouTube earlier, and really here's some data points if you ever need any justification as to the importance of them. And Lenka actually put out an interesting post last week, I think it was, about video. Is video important? Should we be doing video? And what's quite interesting is that 4 times more people prefer watching YouTube than non-video social platforms. And what that means, I think that's quite interesting, because in the rush to do video, we say we should do video and put video on every channel. But actually, the way that people want to consume content is slightly different. For example, if you're just kind of scrolling your Instagram feed and you just want to get kind of quick snippets of information because you just want some entertainment, you're not necessarily going to go off and watch a video right then. Because it requires effort, it requires concentration. Whereas if you're going to YouTube, for example, there's more intent. You're going there to watch something. So it's kind of that difference of intent, which kind of plays out for that reason why we're seeing more and more people prefer watching YouTube than non-video social platforms. Really important one, 68% of people watch YouTube to make a purchasing decision. We've really seen that play out at ContentCal. That's why I talk so much about YouTube all the time, and I kind of always bang in the drum, because our YouTube channel, whilst it doesn't have the biggest amount of subscribers, generates not much in the way of comments and engagement, but it has significant watch time. And it's that watch time is the only thing I personally really care about, because that means that people are watching explainers of our product, helping to them to reinforce their decisions, understand more about our product, our service, etc., so that they can make an informed decision. And we've seen that dramatically drive purchasing behavior. and make the whole process of purchasing so much simpler, because people will now come to us interested in our product, but having already watched tutorials and already watched the videos and descriptions of the product, they know as much as they need to about it. So the conversation with us is just purely about how much does it cost. And that's where you really want to be. And that's where YouTube plays such a brilliant role in terms of your overall kind of content marketing story. And like we've just seen here, 84% have bought a company's product after seeing one of their videos. We can absolutely see that. And there's one thing here on this data, because I've taken this data from lots of different sources, but I put the source at the end of this deck, is that I would disagree that the average attention span is 8 seconds, because essentially people don't have a short attention span. There's just a lot of choice out there. So provided you're making something that you deem to be valuable, then ultimately people will watch it for longer, because you'll see huge people going on huge Netflix binges. So there's no shortage of attention out there. It's just about capturing people's attention as soon as we can within the video, making it powerful, making it valuable. And that's the thing. It's not the fact that we don't have attention span, it's the fact that we're spoiled for choice. So there's some trends, but now what I want to do is kind of package up some of the things that we've been seeing over the last quarter, the new feature that have been added, and because all of these features kind of bucket into certain trends and certain kind of directions that the platforms are going in. That I think there's 4 of them that we need to be aware of. So as I said, 4 growth areas. You will have heard enough about this, I think, but audio first social media. So this is what I call it, but essentially think of it as Clubhouse ultimately. But there's a lot happening here. So I've put this as Twitter audio spaces plus Clubhouse plus everyone else, right? So talk about Clubhouse really quickly. It's now past 13 million downloads. It's only just gone past its 1-year anniversary. More people now have the ability to create clubs. The access is increasing. The Android app is still a couple of months away. Apparently it's going to be here in May, but that's had significant impact to its growth, that's for sure. But Twitter audio spaces, so this is Twitter's competitor to it, is actually rolling out this month. Later this month is the word, so don't exactly know when, but yeah, I'm really excited about that. And this is already available for Android, so that's going to happen. The thing that I really like, I've put here like accessibility of Twitter audio spaces is its killer feature. Having tested out Twitter audio spaces, the thing I like the best is the ability to run like live subtitles. So this is much more accessible than something like Clubhouse, for example. If someone is hard of hearing, it means they're not excluded from seeing the content. But there are definitely still some issues and some challenges. But fundamentally, it's just a really interesting space because Facebook are rolling out their version of it. So are Instagram. In fact, Instagram rolled out, wasn't quite the same thing, but it kind of links into it, and I want to bring it up. Instagram brought out live rooms, which was, I think, 2 weeks ago. It's available to everyone. So this allows you to go live with up to 4 people and invite lots of people to chat and interact and that kind of stuff. And I find that kind of collaborative approach to content really, really powerful, because the more people you work with as part of your content, the more chance and the further your content goes, because essentially you're kind of teaming up with 4 other people that ultimately is going to leverage the power of those 4 other people's channels. So for me, that collaborative stuff is really powerful. LinkedIn's working on a Clubhouse competitor. They're in the kind of advanced stages of that, so we should expect to see that. Reddit are working on one as well. We saw the first designs of Facebook's version, of which is actually put it into kind of beta testing. It's called Hotline. I'm not entirely sure on that as a name, to be honest. Sounds a bit seedy in my view, but with Facebook Hotline, they've taken a bit of a different view on it, in the fact that they've kind of put it a bit more of an interactive podcast, which I think that's quite a smart way of doing, because this allows you to kind of schedule when you're going to be going live. Essentially, people can compose questions in advance. Those questions can be up and down voted. And once you go live, the person that is kind of being interviewed or whatever, the person in the hot seat, if you will, can then go through and answer these questions. for me, it kind of feels more like an interactive podcast, because we all know the growth of podcasts has been absolutely significant. But the thing that podcasts lack is the interactivity, because you might listen to a great podcast with a fantastic guest and you think, oh, I wish I could have asked them a question, or I wish they would have covered this bit. So Hotline kind of seeks to answer that question. So, it kind of takes the interactive piece of a podcast. And for me, it's that kind of level of structure and the ability to up and down vote comments that I think is more powerful than typical kind of approach that Clubhouse has, which is like, let's schedule something. We're going to go live and talk about, I don't know, whatever topic. And it's so open to like poor quality content. So for me, I found my usage of Clubhouse dramatically dropping, just because I just find I was trawling through too much waffle that I had no idea what I was going to get. And I know for some, that's kind of the excitement. You could go into a room where you've got loads of value, or you could join one where you just basically earn nothing, or learn nothing rather. And for me, it's that's our time is our most precious asset. So for me, that is too risky to spend an hour wondering what we're going to get from it. So that's why I like kind of Facebook's approach, because it's like, here's the questions posed to this individual. Here's what is going to be discussed in this session. And like, can I upvote, downvote comments? Can I submit the questions in advance? So for that makes the whole kind of audio experience a much more useful experience. And of course, the most important part is that that will all be recorded and have a transcript associated to it. Which is for me, the biggest limiting factor of Clubhouse is that it's not recorded. So there's nothing we can do with that content after it. So we've invested an hour in building something, a piece of content, and we can't do anything with it. For me, that rules it out of contention as to, for me, being able to recommend it as a good marketing tool. But for something like, like Hotline for Twitter audio spaces, where they're inherently building in the ability to record and transcribe, so you can either, take snippets of that and put it as videos or audio files, put it on YouTube. You'll have a transcript, so you can create a blog or a write-up of it. And it's that how a piece of content can kind of manifest and be repurposed in multiple different formats and channels. That for me is the thing that's really important. But the summary about this is like, it's all about belonging and personal connection. And this is what I mean, where I think audio first social as a thing is absolutely here to stay, because it really does play a really nice part in our kind of content journey. To explain that very quickly, I'm going to use Twitter as an example. So let's say I follow Lambert on Twitter, which I do. So that's a great way of following people, is a great way of like casually keeping up to date with what they're sharing, what they're talking about. It's a furthest removed interaction, right? Because the algorithm determines whether I'm actually going to see Lenker's content or not. So occasionally I see Lenker's posts and I like them, etc. So it's quite a casual interaction. But what Twitter have also rolled out is the Twitter fleets. So they're Twitter stories. So we're all pretty familiar with the story format, but obviously Twitter wanted to get on the bandwagon with that. So imagine that Lenker starts doing stories. For me, that's a nice next step. I followed a bit of Lenker's content, interact with it a bit. Now I want to understand a bit more about the person behind the business, behind Cambridge social media. So actually I can start looking at Lenker's stories. That's why every single platform offers stories now, pretty much. So I can see what Lenker's like as a person. Now, the real nice evolution of that, moving on into like the audio spaces, is that, I feel like I now have like a personal connection with Lenker, because I've been watching her stories, kind of seeing what she's up to, etc. So to take that one step further, that's where Twitter audio spaces comes in, where Lenker might be like, well, I'm going live. I'll be running an audio space between, 7 and 8 p.m. We'll be talking about X subject. And now feel like I've got a really personal interaction. I'll be like, hey, Lenker, I'm joining your audio space. We can have a dialogue, and we feel like we've got some personal interaction, because there's nothing that quite connects like the human voice. And I think for me, that's the thing that Clubhouse has absolutely hit on. Yeah, it's been a beneficiary of the fact of us getting Zoom fatigue and us being in lockdown, etc. But fundamentally, it's hit on something which is like the personal connection of the human voice. It does away of those moments of things get lost in the written communication, right? And obviously, I know Twitter has got a very bad reputation for trolls and just general hate and horrible people on there. But when you start to turn that into the human voice, it takes a very different person and a very different individual to actually start to say anything negative like to someone's face. So it feels much more personal connection. So now you take your content from like broad reach. So, you know, I put something on my Twitter feed and out it goes, going broad, into something where you're offering a bit more personal connection through your stories or fleets in Twitter's case. And then you're going into the real like one-to-one deep interaction, which is in the kind of audio spaces element. So it feels like that is a really nice trajectory of where we're headed towards social, which is more about personal connection, which leads really nicely onto the second one of these kind of 4 key growth areas, which is the rise of private communities. So these private communities, I kind of mean this in 2 ways, really, and I'll explain. So these are not social media platforms I'm going to mention, but it's really important that I think we all are aware of the growth of these 2 platforms. So the first one is called Substack, which is basically a newsletter platform, quite similar in approach to Medium, I would say, but ultimately it allows anyone to kind of create a mailing list and distribute a newsletter. Substack has seen tremendous growth, and it allows people now to build private communities around the content that they're creating. So naturally, you'll see a lot of CEOs of organizations on there, technology entrepreneurs, you'll see celebrities, you'll see literally anything. If you're passionate about something, it's very likely you can build a community around it. And Substack is that platform that allows people to build a kind of subscriber base and newsletter from scratch, really. So Substack has seen tremendous growth, and now it becomes, like we've been talking about, much more kind of private community where, you know, if I followed Lenka on Substack, the different thing about Substack compared to typical social media platforms is that every time Lenka posts something, I will see it. It will land in my inbox. It's not like, oh, I have to try and predict what the algorithm's going to say and, you know, will it show my message? No, it's going to the person that's subscribed. And that's, you know, it's no more complex than how we manage email today. But it goes to show, and the growth of Substack goes to show that actually, you know, smaller, more niche communities, more engaged communities are ones that actually are meaning more to people at the moment. And we're starting to see that trend that we've gone broad, and then we're starting kind of bringing our communities back to be a bit more small. Same with Patreon, right? Which is the natural evolution of Facebook groups. So let's take Cambridge Social Media, nice free Facebook group, great helpful content, brilliant. But like, we still can't really, Facebook groups still a bit awkward, really, because yeah, everyone's on Facebook, so it makes it easy to join a Facebook group. But fundamentally, we still got the same challenge as to whether Facebook's going to choose to serve us content from that group. So something like Patreon means that we can subscribe to kind of more private communities and be part of something. And that's the thing. It's about belonging. So like Patreon is a little bit different to Substack in that fact that it is predominantly a platform for individuals to charge and monetize their community. So for exclusive content. So it's like the next step on from the free Facebook group. So if Lenka wanted to take her free Facebook group and start to make it into something that people would have to pay for, but to get really extra valuable content and more tailored content, then that's what Patreon is really good for. And the reason I spend a lot of time just explaining those 2 platforms, because all of the other social media platforms are trying to kind of catch up and provide features that basically replicate what Substack and Patreon are doing, because they know that this is a potential threat. So Facebook is rolling out the monetizing of subscribers through subscriptions. So it's actually allowing the opportunity, and this is live now. Facebook rolled this out in the last quarter, where people can now start to subscribe to individuals. So if I wanted to subscribe to follow Lenka, I can now subscribe to get exclusive content, just exactly the same as Patreon. LinkedIn is cottoned on to Substack's growth. So there's now the ability to create a newsletter on LinkedIn. This is live now, but I do not have access to it. Curious if anyone else does. The way you would know if you've got access to this is that if you went onto LinkedIn to create a post, and when you pressed write an article, you should have the opportunity to write a newsletter too. So go and check if you have that. But when you create a newsletter, people can subscribe to that, which, like I've been talking about, means that the content you create will go to everyone. So it will be served to people's inboxes as well as being served within LinkedIn as an app. So it gives you fantastic opportunity to really reach your most engaged audience. Twitter in the last quarter have purchased an email platform called Review, which is basically, it's going to be building something very much like Substack. And if you think Twitter, I think, have gone back to being one of the most forward-thinking social media platforms. And Twitter have seen the most kind of like platform growth within this last quarter in terms of new features. Because actually, if we call out that Twitter example that I was talking about a minute ago, where, you know, we're following Lenka in her feed, we're looking at Lenka's stories, now we've got an audio space on the go with Lenka, and now we think we're really bought into what Lenka's talking about and doing, and bought into her as an individual. So now actually what we want to do is, or what Lenka might want to do, is start to kind of like double down on those like more avid fans and followers. So now she can start building an email subscription database directly on Twitter, so people can opt in to subscribe to her newsletter. So whenever Lenka puts out a weekly or monthly newsletter, it will arrive to everyone's inboxes. And similar to that, which is more in the kind of Patreon style of things, is that Twitter have announced super follows, haven't rolled it out yet, but they did announce it and show some designs for it. So it's probably in late stage. Is that super follows allows people to subscribe and pay to follow a certain individual. So, you know, if we get to a point where Lenka's providing incredibly valuable content, and now some of her content she's going to kind of hold back, now I can like pay to super follow Lenka to make sure that I receive her exclusive content. You're going to see that becoming really popular with like artists, musicians, that kind of thing. Meaning that, you know, rather than giving away their music for free as content, they can start kind of monetizing that for people that want to get like first review and sneak peeks of, you know, latest songs or art or whatever. So this kind of private community thing, this about, like I said, about belonging and this personal interaction, personal connection. And the trajectory is not about having lots of connections, lots of friends and fans and stuff. It's about having a closer knit, really engaged community. Values-based communication. Love this as a thing. I haven't got much to say on this other than this kind of killer statistic, which is 71% of consumers prefer buying from brands that align to their values. We are all increasingly aware of our impact on the earth, the good we're doing. And I think the pandemic has very much shed some light on some of our kind of typical practices as a society that potentially are either unsustainable or not as wholesome as they could be. So what we started to see is brands or consumers buying from brands that represent their values, that live their values. And that's the important thing, people that live their values. I always mention them, but I'll mention them again. Like Patagonia, I think, as a clothing brand, are a really good example of an organization that represents what they stand for, i.e. the circular economy. I think they were the first clothing store to take other people's clothes in and sell them as secondhand items within their stores. And they talk heavily about sustainability, circular economy, and they use social media as a key platform to deliver that message. And as a result, they've seen some significant growth, because essentially if you believe what someone else believes, magic happens, right? So it's when you're really appealing to the emotional state of an individual. And that's why I talk so often about like brands that are, or brands, individuals, any businesses that are starting to do social media, to be really clear about what you believe in, what you want to stand for, and what you want to be known for. And it's when there's alignment between what you want to be known for, what you stand for, and what other people believe. When other people believe what you believe, as I said, magic happens. And I think just as a general theme, it's just, this isn't something that we need to take action on, but we just need to be cognizant of it, is that social media in general is moving away from distribution to monetization. Social media can't get much bigger than it already is. It's 56% of the world's population. And you know, with 4.2 billion people on it, there's limited headroom as to how far it can grow. So it's becoming less about like getting our message in and having massive audience and pushing that out. There's always going to be a part of that, I think, but that isn't always like number one. Actually, social media is becoming more about monetization. not just about monetization of our products through all of the social commerce that we've been talking about and increasing ways that we can start to sell our products and services through social, but also how we monetize our content. As an example, Facebook in the last quarter rolled out paid for events. So you can now start to charge for tickets to events that you're organizing. This is available for everyone right now. Facebook have rolled out creator payments, so people can, once they kind of subscribe to your content, we were talking about Facebook subscriptions in the last couple of slides, but people can now kind of pay those creators and give them a donation because of like content that they're enjoying. Social commerce, and that's meant to say shoppable, not stoppable posts, have become ubiquitous across the platform. So yeah, social commerce becomes, it's fundamental. But what we need to take from this is like marketing on social media is becoming less about driving traffic elsewhere and more about becoming a destination for your audience to take an action. And I think that's definitely what we're seeing across all of these trends and changes. And what I mean by this is like, typically we would use social, and we don't need to change. I'm going to caveat this before I carry on talking. Like, don't feel like you need to change anything just because you've read this slide and some trends and changes. You don't need to change anything right now. This is just about us having kind of some awareness as to what's going to be happening in the future. What's the kind of direction of travel? But fundamentally, we typically market on social to either build a community or drive our audience to take an action somewhere, sign up for something, sign up for an event, sign up for, join our community, download an asset, whatever it might be. We're asking them to do something. But where social media, we've typically used it for distribution to either kind of push those messages out to take those people to go take an action somewhere else, i.e. head to our website or do whatever. Now social media is becoming more about being a destination for our content, and that's what they're fighting for at the moment. So for example, like with Facebook events, we want to charge for these events potentially, and we should use Facebook as a destination. We should use them as a platform to do that. So it all becomes about marketing the Facebook event. And similarly with like how we might want to drive an email subscriber list, rather than trying to pull people to our website to read our blog and then subscribe on our website. What the social platforms are encouraging us to do is to like build our subscription and our newsletter subscription directly on our own platform, or on Facebook or on Twitter or on LinkedIn, etc. So it becomes about social as the destination for them to take that action, whether it's subscribing to something, downloading something, like signing up for something, whatever, or buying something fundamentally. So social wants to be, and social being all of the platforms, they want to be the beginning and the end for your content, i.e. the place where you're going to publish it and the place that the audience will take that action. So, right, that is me done. I did say I'd do this in half an hour, failed that massively. So if you ever want to have a bit of a kind of like one-on-one strategy session and just talk about social media in general, about how we can apply these strategies to you, I do free drop-in sessions every single week. One a week, every Wednesday afternoon, I think it is. So if you want to drop into one of those, you're welcome to. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you've not done already. I talk about this kind of stuff all the time. Any questions outside of this, you can always email me. There's my email address. And if you want to find out more about ContentCal and you want to see how ContentCal can benefit you as a product, you know where to find us. With that, I'm going to give you all a break from my voice. And any questions?
Awesome session. Like, I'm loving all the comments. People are loving your session. It is brilliant. And I will take the liberty to take the first question for myself. And it will kind of come to what you finished off with, saying that a lot of the social media channels are trying to become the destination for you to do everything. So to have your community, to have your audio, to have your subscribers and everything, to have your paid events. Isn't it dangerous for businesses to really so heavily invest and allow these platforms to do it all? Because I'm always I would suggest businesses that it's better for them to have a website and have some sort of a community outside of Facebook and have a mailing list that they own, because as we know, social media changes so fast and you are not always or pretty much never, fully in control of who will see your content when. So what would be your stand on this?
I would agree with you, Lenka. So it's kind of why I caveated this slide with like, don't read this like you need to change how you're approaching things. It's more about us thinking about the direction of travel. And yeah, for me, and when we do this in ContentCal, I would definitely feel very uncomfortable about having our sole email subscriber list on Facebook. That's for sure. Our kind of core destination of our email list should always be on our primary owned stuff. 100% agree. Too much control from one social media platform is just bad for business, I think. But where we can take this as a kind of an interesting stance is that whilst we would still try and drive our email subscriptions and have that on our kind of owned database, absolutely, that should always be a priority. I wouldn't recommend anyone changing that, and I'd be hard pushed to change that myself as well. But with these subscription platforms or these kind of like email subscriber stuff, particularly let's take LinkedIn, for example, because that's something that exists today. I do like that as an approach, as a way to kind of better convert your LinkedIn following, to kind of weed out the people that are casual followers, and try and kind of double down on the people that really are quite keen to hear from you. For me, that's then, think about it like a funnel. And let's take an example where we've got, for me, myself, I'm talking about my kind of personal brand, even though that sounds awful, but like, I've got 12,500 followers on LinkedIn. I imagine 90% of those don't really care what I have to say, or very casual. There'll be 10% of them, maybe less, that are interested in what I have to say. So it's that 10% that actually I would like to kind of make sure they always see my content. So it's that 10% actually that I think getting them on my LinkedIn subscriber base is a really good thing, because that means that, that 10%, which is 1,200 people, I want to make sure that every week they see my most important content. And within that content, absolutely, we'll be driving them to other bits and bobs, right? We'll be driving them to our website and taking other actions, but thinking of it as a funnel. But does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. And it definitely makes sense even in the connection to community platforms. You mentioned Couple. I know that Alex from Shifties, they have built their own community outside of Facebook on Tribe. And they're testing a platform for that. Definitely there's been, partially because there's been a growing movement of delete Facebook, and kind of the user, even though the numbers of users are growing, at the same time, kind of the people's disconnect to a certain extent to social media. I think there is an interesting dynamic to watch out for going forward. And building something that really is kind of standalone, that you own, be it the email list or be it really just following on your website where people subscribe to get notifications about new updates, or be the membership that's outside, is quite important.
Definitely agree. Yeah.
So let's go to the questions. I love this question from Claire. She says, if you are a video phobic, how else can you utilize YouTube? And it definitely goes to the conversation that I kind of started on LinkedIn, where I said you don't have to do video. And I totally loved your kind of distinction between YouTube is a place where we go to watch videos. And I will admit I spend lots of time watching content on YouTube. But seeing videos on other platforms, I'm way less inclined to watch them. So what would you recommend to a person who, maybe like myself or Claire, we're not the most comfortable on camera, on video? I can handle live, but when you put me in front of a camera to record a video, not my thing. But how can you utilize YouTube? Should you utilize YouTube if you really don't like doing videos?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. And I think probably one that I'd need to ask a couple more questions on. But the way that I would think about it is that it doesn't always need to be face to camera. So don't necessarily think about it in the sense of like it's the same thing as you doing a live or a story. It doesn't necessarily need to be like that. So for example, I don't know if this is applicable because obviously we'd be doing very different businesses, but our stuff at ContentCal is purely just kind of explainers of our product. So it's just literally screen share of our product and walking through that, narrated by, unfortunately, me. But there's very little of like face to camera stuff. that we have on YouTube, just kind of either walkthroughs and help videos, mostly like screen shares ultimately. So you could do a whole number of different things, and even if it's just like, if you did a webinar like this, or a podcast or something, you don't even have to have the visual element necessarily. You don't have to have a video or something moving, because something like this slide deck would work perfectly on YouTube. It's just something with the spoken word, that's for sure. But once again, like I'll caveat this in the sense that, yes, YouTube's big. Yes, I keep on saying people should be on it. But fundamentally, if speaking out loud or having your face on camera, things that you just don't feel comfortable with or just don't want to do, then that is okay. You shouldn't feel like immensely pressured to do that. But if you're a fabulous writer, for example, then I would really double down on that. And there's enough kind of newsletter platforms out there, so like Substack or Medium or something like that, and you can build fantastic audiences if you're just a good writer. So you don't need to do it, but I would recommend it if you can. And I think it's worthwhile remembering as well, final point, is that not many people don't feel comfortable, unless you're a complete narcissist. You're probably not very comfortable with seeing yourself on camera, or how you look and how you sound and all that kind of stuff. But it does go away with time, that you'll stop cringing at yourself. And it took me a little while to stop cringing at myself, and it just goes away in time. That's all.
I absolutely loved your kind of point that even though you kind of listed where other people's might be online, if they're on this platform and then they're on that platform. And I know that we had this conversation a couple of times where I'm heavily one platform focused kind of a gal, and you're more, let's keep our eggs in multiple baskets kind of a person, like to spread a little bit more. But I love that you explained how differently people are using different platforms, and how to really think about, if YouTube, you don't have to have a huge following, you don't have to have a massive amount of subscribers, you don't have to treat it to become a YouTuber, to have a community there, to have comments. If it's simple as that you have certain products or solutions and you can embed it on your website, and you can have people have it keyword optimized, and people, when they're searching for something, to find it, then I really love the mindset shift that you really presented here with kind of YouTube, where you can still have a YouTube channel, can really utilize YouTube channel, but being cautious and aware of what numbers you're watching and what is the purpose of you using YouTube, with definitely some great ideas of how to create content when speaking to a camera or doing recorded bits, and editing yourself is not your favorite thing.
Absolutely agree.
We have another question from James, who's asking, does Hotline create RSS podcast feed for you to get people subscribed in other apps?
Honestly, I don't know, because I don't have access to the test of it yet. They only announced details for it on Friday. It's a very cool idea though. So yeah, don't know. Lots more to come on that though. But I like your thinking though, James. That's for sure.
I love this comment. We can't see it, but it's our mutual friend Joe Glover saying, doesn't Andy look angelic in his glowing white jumper?
Brilliant. I have no idea how to respond to that, but thank you, mate.
I don't think it was a real question. I just loved seeing that. I wanted to put it in. We have another question from someone asking, if Facebook want to be the beginning and ending place for content, do you expect them to increase organic reach for pages again?
Oh, that's a good question.
It is.
Oh, I'd like to think so. The optimist in me would like to think so. And I haven't really thought about it, actually. Well, it would stand to reason if Facebook can start to monetize their product, not just through ads, but through other means, whether it's taking a rake off of payments made to creators for event tickets, for transactions that are happening through Facebook shops. If they start to drive meaningful revenue from that, that's going to decrease their reliance on ads. And once they've got a decreased reliance on ads, then naturally organic reach goes up fundamentally, because that's the only reason organic reach gets suppressed, is because Facebook only have so much ad inventory to offer. And what ad inventory is basically the amount of time everyone spends on their phone scrolling Facebook. Facebook only has a limited amount of space of which it can show an ad. So with less reliance on ads, then organic reach will go up. So that's a positive way of looking at it, actually. So I've not thought about that. So let's think positive and hope that plays out.
Absolutely. I'm looking if we have any further questions. I can't see any. So if you have questions for Andy, let us know. I know this is always a lot to handle. And I'll personally be definitely rewatching and kind of taking more practical notes. But I love this comment from Alex that he says that they've been loving Tribe as their safe space away from social media. It's still a trial, so they might flip back to a social media platform, but this news more about emphasis towards quality over quantity is music to his ears regardless as a community builder. And I totally agree. And I loved, again, how you explained it as kind of a funnel where certain platforms and certain content on certain platforms will be your top of funnel, where a lot of followers might see some of your updates here and there. Who want to see more of you can go to stories and get a little bit more of a connection and build relationships. Who wants to really see more of you will go to your community group or your kind of newsletter or somewhere else. And obviously from there, you're building a base of very warm leads, let's say very engaged kind of fans, raving fans, who then are pretty much ready to be monetized and to work with and really build something very special, private, unique. But it's not about the biggest numbers. It is about the quality of individuals over there.
Love it. Yeah, it's a brilliant note to end on, I think. Definitely.
So Alex also said, also echoed your Glover loving Andy Lambert. So I think that's it for today. As always, any thoughts on Discord, Andy, from James?
Oh yeah, Discord. I can't give too much of a narrative on it because I should have mentioned it actually, because Discord have pivoted from being a predominantly gamer focused platform into an audio first platform for anything really, rather than just zeroing in on gamers. They've got 100 million users, so in theory they should be first to win this kind of battle for this audio first social media thing. I've heard good reports of it. I'm not an active Discord user, to be honest, but I've heard fantastic reports. The difficulty is like crossing the chasm from niche community into mainstream is quite a chasm to cross. So very interested what happens there. So no direct thoughts on it, James, but I'm glad you're thinking about it. That's for sure.
This has sparked another kind of idea thought in my head. It's talking about Twitch, because Twitch hasn't been mentioned much lately, but obviously Twitch has its own very unique following in definitely the gamer world, but even outside of it. And there is an interesting kind of statistic that comes out from Twitch all over again. It's that people don't have a short attention span. They have a short attention span for shitty content or for not interesting, not relevant content. Because, for example, I can watch 2-hour YouTube videos that are about neuroscience without a problem, but give me a bad TikTok, and in 5 seconds, I'm bored and I'm moving on. So do you have any thoughts on actually Twitch for usage? Where is Twitch right now? Who is it using? Is it something that people could be considering?
For me personally, because it's still, I know it does kind of slightly blur outside of the niche gamer community, but fundamentally that's kind of where it's at, I would say. So for me, I tend not to think about it too much because it's typically out of the sphere of influence, because it's a little too niche, I would say, for typical businesses to really yield value from. If you look at like you said, the statistics for Twitch are unbelievable. And if you're in the right business, and if you target that demographic, so typical younger demographic skewing more heavily male, gamers ultimately, then you're in a good place. For me, if you were starting to think about Twitch and getting your products and services in front of that kind of core demographic, which has fantastic spending power as well. For me, I'd probably look at thinking about it from a more of a paid media perspective or a partnership perspective, i.e. working with a creator rather than kind of jumping in as an individual and trying to get organic growth on it. I would take that personally as a strategy if I was a brand trying to get involved in Twitch.
That's fantastic. And it takes us exactly to 1 hour. So
Okay.
Thank you so much, Andy, for a brilliant session. We will share all Andy's links to his free strategy session. We will share his slides. Obviously, the replay is available and everything. So we will share that with you guys, and make sure that you follow Andy. I love following him on LinkedIn because he does similar to this kind of a shorter updates every single week, which is always great to stay up to date with some of the news and see what's up. And as you see today, it's not just about the update, but it's about what the update actually means to you as a business owner. So thank you, Andy, for a fantastic session again. And I'm sure that it's not going to be long until we'll see you again.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Speak soon.
Speak soon. Bye.
Bye.